Hold the line! Keep it tight! Steady, lads.
August 13th, 1704. On the banks of the Danube River in Bavaria, 52,000 men are about to collide in a battle that will determine the fate of Europe. For 3 hours, the fields will run red with blood, empires will tremble, dynasties will fall, and one man, an English general dismissed by his enemies as cautious and unremarkable, will prove himself the greatest military mind of his age. This is the story of Blenheim, the battle that broke French supremacy, the battle that saved Vienna, the battle that changed everything. But to understand how we arrived at this moment of reckoning, we must travel back 3 years, to a continent torn apart by ambition, blood, and the endless hunger for power. The year 1701. Europe is burning. King Charles II of Spain has died childless, and with his death, the greatest inheritance in human history hangs in the balance. The Spanish Empire, stretching from the Americas to the Philippines, from Italy to the Netherlands, falls into dispute. 2 families claim the throne, the Austrian Habsburgs, who have ruled the Holy Roman Empire for centuries, and the Bourbons of France, led by the most powerful monarch in the world, King Louis XIV. Louis, the Sun King, has spent 40 years building French dominance. His armies are the largest, his generals the most experienced, his ambition limitless. When his grandson, Philip of Anjou, is crowned King Philip V of Spain, Louis sees his dream materializing before him, a Bourbon on the throne in Madrid. French influence from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean, the balance of power in Europe shattered, but the other powers will not accept this. England, the Dutch Republic, and Austria form the Grand Alliance. Their goal is simple: stop Louis, prevent the union of France and Spain, save Europe from French domination.
War explodes across the continent. From the Spanish Netherlands to northern Italy, armies clash, cities burn, tens of thousands die. But by 1704, after 3 years of grinding conflict, Louis holds the advantage. His marshals have won victory after victory. The alliance is fracturing. Vienna, capital of the Habsburg Empire, stands threatened, and that is when 2 men step forward to change the course of history. John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, 54 years old. Born to minor English gentry, Churchill has risen through talent, ambition, and political cunning. He is a tall man, handsome, with piercing eyes that miss nothing. His soldiers call him Corporal John, for he walks among them, learns their names, shares their hardships. His officers respect him for his tactical brilliance. His enemies underestimate him at their peril. But Marlborough is more than a general. He is a diplomat, a politician, a master of the great game. He understands that this war will not be won by battlefield courage alone. It requires coordination between proud nations, between suspicious allies, between men who speak different languages and worship different gods. His partner in this endeavor is Prince Eugene of Savoy. 61 years old, born in Paris but rejected by Louis XIV for military service due to his slight build and effeminate appearance. Eugene fled to Austria, swore vengeance against the king who spurned him, and became one of the most feared commanders in Europe. He is small, wiry, with dark eyes that burn with intensity. Where Marlborough is diplomatic and measured, Eugene is fierce and direct. Together, they are formidable. In the spring of 1704, these 2 men face an impossible situation. Marshal Camille d'Austun, Duke of Tallard, leads a French army of 46,000 men toward Bavaria. His goal is to link up with Maximilian Emanuel, Elector of Bavaria, who commands 14,000 Bavarian troops. Together, they will march on Vienna. If the Austrian capital falls, the war is over. The Grand Alliance will collapse. French hegemony will be complete. Marlborough and Eugene know they must act. But how? The French army is in Bavaria, 400 miles from Marlborough's position in the Spanish Netherlands. No army has ever marched that distance through hostile territory in a single campaign season. The logistics alone would defeat most commanders. Food, ammunition, shoes, discipline, 1,000 problems. each one capable of destroying an army before it ever reaches the battlefield. But Marlborough is not most commanders. May 19th, 1704. Marlborough's army begins to move. 19,000 British, Dutch, Danish, and German troops. They march south from the Netherlands following the Rhine River. The soldiers do not know their destination. Marlborough has told no one, not even his own government. He fears that if the Dutch learn of his plan, they will forbid it, terrified of leaving their borders undefended. The deception is masterful. Marlborough announces he is marching to the Moselle River to threaten French positions in Alsace. The French believe him. They shift their forces to meet this phantom threat. Meanwhile, Marlborough's army moves deeper into Germany, marching 20 miles per day, supplied by a logistics network the general has spent months preparing. Food depots await at every stop. Fresh shoes are distributed to prevent blisters. The sick are cared for in field hospitals. Marlborough has thought of everything. One soldier, a private in the English infantry, would later write, "We marched like we were going to church, not war. Every morning, bread. Every evening, a place to sleep." The Duke, they said, had made arrangements. We believed it because we saw it with our own eyes. We would have followed him to hell itself. By early June, the army reaches the main river. Here, Marlborough turns east, abandoning any pretense of marching to the Moselle. The truth is revealed. They are going. On June 10th, Marlborough's forces unite with Prince Eugene's Imperial Austrian army at Blindheim. The two commanders embrace like brothers. Eugene grips Marlborough's hand and says, "Now we can begin." Together, they have 52,000 men. Tallard and the Elector of Bavaria have 60,000. The alliance is outnumbered. But Marlborough and Eugene possess something their enemies lack: unity of command, speed of decision, and the courage to risk everything on a single throw of the dice. Throughout July and early August, the armies maneuver across Bavaria. Skirmishes erupt. Villages are burned. Marlborough and Eugene need to bring the French to battle, but Tallard is cautious. He knows his position is strong. He can wait for reinforcements. He can threaten Vienna without risking a major. Marlborough grows desperate. Every day that passes weakens the alliance. The Dutch are demanding his return. The Austrian court is panicking. Food supplies dwindle. Disease spreads through the camps. If the French will not fight, the campaign will collapse into failure. Then, on August 12th, French scouts report that Marlborough and Eugene are marching north toward the town of Donauworth. Tallard sees an opportunity. If the Allies are retreating, he can harass their rear guard, perhaps catch them divided. He orders his army forward toward the small village of Blenheim on the Danube's northern bank. It is exactly what Marlborough wanted. The French make camp along a 4-mile front, with their left flank anchored on the village of Blenheim, their center spread across open fields bisected by a marshy stream called the Nebel, and their right flank protected by the village of Lutzingen and dense woods beyond. Tallard has 60,000 men, 120 artillery pieces, and a strong defensive position. He is confident. Marshal Ferdinand de Marsin, commanding the right wing alongside the Elector of Bavaria, is less certain. He surveys the ground and mutters, "Tomorrow will be a day of reckoning." That night, neither army sleeps. French soldiers clean their muskets, sharpen their bayonets, write letters home. The sound of psalms drifts from the Allied camp as English and German chaplains lead prayers. Marlborough walks among his regiments, speaking quietly to officers, ensuring every man knows the plan. A young English ensign records, "The Duke came past our position near midnight. He stopped and asked if we had eaten. We said, 'Yes, sir, we had.' He nodded and said, 'Good. Tomorrow you will need your strength. Fight well and we will break them.' There was no fear in his voice, only certainty. We believed him." August 13th, 1704. Dawn breaks over Bavaria. 2 o'clock in the morning. Marlborough's army rises in darkness. Breakfast is eaten cold. Equipment is checked. Officers pass among the ranks, whispering encouragements. The air is cool. heavy with mist from the Danube. At 3 o'clock, the army begins to move. 52,000 men, advancing in 8 columns toward the French position. Cavalry on the wings, infantry in the center. Artillery dragged forward by sweating horses. The only sound is the tramp of boots, the jingle of harness, the rumble of wheels. By 6 o'clock, the Allies have crossed the Kessel Stream and deployed on the heights overlooking the Nebel. Below them, barely half a mile distant, the French army stretches across the plain. Tallard is shocked. He expected the Allies to retreat. Instead, they are attacking. Confusion ripples through the French camp. Soldiers snatch up weapons. Officers shout orders. Cavalry mounts up. But Tallard recovers quickly. His position is strong. Let the Allies come. Let them cross the marshy Nebel under fire. Let them exhaust themselves against stone walls and veteran infantry. This will be a defensive victory, a slaughter. At 7 o'clock, the first Allied guns open fire. 24-pound cannons, hauled forward to the ridge, begin hammering the French lines. Roundshot tears through formations. Canister shreds men into red mist. The French artillery responds, and soon the entire valley reverberates with thunder. Marlborough's plan is complex, requiring precise timing and coordination. Eugene will attack the French right at Lutzingen, pinning Marsin and the Elector in place. Meanwhile, Marlborough will assault Blenheim village on the French left, then concentrate his main force against Tallard's center. If successful, the French army will be split in 2, isolated, destroyed. But first, they must cross the Nebel. 8 o'clock. Lord Cutts, commanding the Allied right wing, leads his infantry toward Blenheim village. 6 English and Hessian battalions, roughly 4,000 men, advancing across open ground toward the largest concentration of French infantry on the battlefield. The French have fortified Blenheim heavily. 9 battalions of infantry, over 9,000 men, commanded by the Marquis de Clerambault. The houses have been loopholed for musket fire. Barricades block the streets. This is a fortress, and Clerambault intends to hold it. Cutts' men march forward in perfect formation, colors flying, drums beating. They cross the Nebel, struggling through marsh and water up to their knees. French artillery opens fire at 300 yards. Canister rips into the ranks. Men fall by the dozens. But the line does not break. The survivors press on. At 100 yards, the French infantry opens fire. A wall of flame erupts from Blenheim's edge. Over 9,000 muskets discharge simultaneously. The sound is like the world ending. The front ranks of Cutts' brigade vanish, literally torn apart by the weight of lead. Bodies pile upon bodies. The assault staggers. A British sergeant wounded in the shoulder would later recall, "I saw the man beside me lose his head. Not wounded, lost it. One moment he was there, the next his body stood for a heartbeat before collapsing. Blood sprayed across my face. I could not hear anything but ringing, but I kept walking. We all did, because the colors were still moving forward, and an Englishman does not abandon his colors." The survivors reach the barricades and hurl themselves against French bayonets. Vicious hand-to-hand combat erupts. Men stab, shoot, club each other with musket butts. The English are brave, but they are outnumbered 2 to 1. After 15 minutes of savage fighting, Cutts orders a withdrawal. The assault has failed, but it has succeeded in its true purpose. Clerambault, seeing the ferocity of the attack, panics. He calls for reinforcements. More French battalions are funneled into Blenheim, packing the village with over 16,000 men. 1/3 of Tallard's entire infantry, locked in a static defense. Marlborough smiles when he receives the news. The French have taken the bait. While Cutts attacks Blenheim, Prince Eugene launches his assault on the French right. His imperial infantry, Austrian and Prussian regiments, advance toward Lutzingen and the woods beyond. They face Marsin's French forces and the Bavarian army, roughly 30,000 men in strong defensive positions. Eugene's attack is desperate and brutal. The ground is broken, the woods dense. Artillery cannot support the infantry. The Austrians must fight their way forward through musket volleys and cavalry charges. Battalion after battalion is thrown into the meat grinder. The Prussian guards lose half their strength in the first hour. The fighting is so intense that Eugene has 3 horses shot from under him. The third time he continues on foot, sword in hand, rallying his men through sheer force of will. A Prussian officer writes, "The prince was everywhere. When we faltered, he appeared before us, his coat torn, his face blackened with powder, shouting for us to advance. How could we refuse such a man? We followed him into the fire, and many of us never came out." For 3 hours, Eugene's assault makes no progress. The French right holds firm. Marsin and the Elector feed in reserves, plug gaps, refuse to break. Eugene's casualties mount. His staff begs him to withdraw. He refuses. "If I pull back," Eugene says, "Marlborough's plan fails. If Marsin shifts troops to help Tallard, the center collapses. We must hold them here, no matter the cost." So the Austrians and Prussians continue to die, buying time with their blood. 9 o'clock. While Eugene fights and cuts pins the French left, Marlborough assembles his main striking force in the center. 16,000 infantry and cavalry positioned to cross the Nebel and break Tallard's line. But the Nebel is a nightmare. The stream is narrow but bordered by marshland that stretches 50 yards on either side. Crossing it under fire will be slow, chaotic, murderous. Tallard knows this. He has positioned his artillery. Marlborough orders his engineers forward. Under heavy fire, they construct makeshift bridges and fascines, bundles of sticks to create paths through the marsh. Casualties are horrific, but slowly, agonizingly, passages are forced. At 10 o'clock, the first Allied infantry battalions begin to cross. Danish and Hanoverian regiments wade into the marsh, struggling to maintain formation as French round-shot plows through them. They reach the far bank and deploy, creating a bridgehead. More battalions follow. The crossing takes over an hour, every minute paid for in blood. A Danish soldier recalls, "The water was brown with blood and mud. Men drowned in the marsh, weighed down by equipment. I saw a boy, no more than 16, sink beneath the surface. His hand reached up, grasping at nothing, and then he was gone. We could not stop to help him. We had to keep moving." By 11 o'clock, Marlborough has 20 battalions across the Nebel, formed in line, supported by artillery. Tallard orders his cavalry to attack, to drive the Allies back into the marsh before they can consolidate. The French cavalry charges, 60 squadrons, over 7,000 horsemen, thundering down the slope in a spectacle of power and terror. Breastplates glinting, sabers raised, they crash into the Allied line. The fighting is savage. Allied infantry form square, presenting walls of bayonets. The French cavalry circles, seeking weakness, firing carbines into the formations. Hand-to-hand melees erupt, but the Allied infantry holds. Volleys of musket fire empty saddles. The French cavalry recoils, regroups, charges again. 3 times the French horsemen attack. 3 times they are repulsed. But the toll on Allied infantry is severe. Battalions are reduced to skeletons. Ammunition runs low. Marlborough knows he must act soon, before his bridgehead collapses. 12:30 in the afternoon. The battle has raged for 5 hours. Eugene is stalemated on the right. Cutz is contained at Blenheim, but Marlborough has achieved his objective. The French army is fixed. Clermont has locked a third of French infantry in Blenheim. Marsin and the Elector are fully engaged with Eugene. That leaves Tallard's center exposed, with only his cavalry and a thin line of infantry. Marlborough sees the opportunity. He orders his cavalry forward. 80 squadrons, over 8,000 horsemen, Dutch, English, Danish, and German troopers. They form in ranks on the far side of the Nebel, wait for the signal. At 1 o'clock, Marlborough raises his hand. Trumpets sound. The Allied cavalry advances. They move at a walk first, dressing their ranks, maintaining formation, then the trot. The ground trembles, then the gallop. A wall of horseflesh and steel crashing forward into Tallard's center. The French cavalry meets them. 10,000 horsemen collide in the largest cavalry battle of the 18th century. The shock is indescribable. Men and horses go down in tangled heaps, sabers slash, pistols fire at point-blank range. The melee becomes a churning chaos of violence. An English cavalry officer writes, "There was no order, no formation. Just kill or be killed. I cut at a French trooper, missed, felt a blow to my helmet that nearly unhorsed me. I turned and thrust my sword into someone's side. French or Allied, I do not know. The world became red and screaming. Then Marlborough commits his reserve. 20 squadrons of fresh English and Imperial cavalry held back for this moment. They crash into the French flank. The French line wavers. Gaps appear. Individual squadrons begin to break. What was a battle becomes a rout. Tallard's cavalry flees. Some ride for the Danube, only to drown in the river. Others are cut down by pursuing Allied horsemen. Tallard himself is captured, taken prisoner by Hessian cavalry. The French marshal, commanding 60,000 men that morning, is now a prisoner in blood-stained coat, his army disintegrating around him. With Tallard's center shattered, Marlborough turns his attention to Blenheim village. 16,000 French infantry remain trapped there, surrounded, cut off from retreat. Marlborough sends a message to Clerambault. "Surrender, and your men will be treated with honor. Continue fighting, and you will be destroyed." Clerambault, realizing his disaster, attempts to escape. He spurs his horse into the Danube, trying to swim across. Weighed down by armor and equipment, he drowns. His men watch their commander disappear beneath the water. Leaderless, surrounded, the French infantry in Blenheim fight on for another hour, but resistance is hopeless. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the survivors surrender. 16,000 French soldiers lay down their arms. The battle is over. The Battle of Blenheim is the bloodiest single day of combat in Europe for a generation. French casualties are catastrophic. 14,000 dead or wounded, 14,000 captured, including Tallard and most of his senior officers. Another 6,000 scattered, fleeing toward the Rhine. Of 60,000 men who began the day, barely 26,000 escape intact. Allied casualties are also severe, 12,000 dead or wounded. Eugene's imperial troops have borne the worst, losing nearly half their strength. But they have won. The battlefield is a vision of hell. Bodies lie in heaps at Blenheim, piled against barricades, sprawled in the streets. The Nebel runs red. Wounded men cry for water, for their mothers, for death. Surgeons work through the night, sawing off shattered limbs, probing for bullets, trying to save who they can. Marlborough, exhausted, writes a message to his wife on the back of a tavern bill. The only paper he has. "I have no time to say more, but to beg you will give my duty to the Queen and let her know her army has had a glorious victory." Glorious, but purchased at a terrible price. News of Blenheim spreads across Europe like wildfire. In London, church bells ring for days. Queen Anne elevates Marlborough to Duke and grants him the royal manor of Woodstock, where Blenheim Palace will be built as a monument to his victory. In Vienna, the emperor weeps with relief. The capital is saved. The empire endures. In Paris, Louis XIV receives the news in silence. His great army, the instrument of French power, has been shattered. Tallard, his trusted marshal, is a prisoner. The myth of French invincibility, carefully cultivated over decades, dies on the banks of the Danube. The war will continue for another 9 years. Marlborough and Eugene will win more victories. Ramillies, Oudenarde, Malplaquet. But Blenheim is the turning point. French expansion stops. The balance of power is preserved. The Grand Alliance holds. And what of the men who fought? Many of the survivors carry scars for the rest of their lives, physical and mental. Some become farmers, some beggars, some soldiers again in later wars. Their names are mostly forgotten, but on August 13, 1704, they changed the world. One anonymous British soldier, writing years later, captures the essence. "I did not know we were making history. We knew only that we were afraid, that we were tired, that we wanted to go home. But the Duke asked us to cross that marsh, to face those guns, to break that line, and so we did. because he had brought us all that way and we could not let him down. What happened afterward, the great consequences, the treaties and the peace, those were for men greater than us to decide. We just fought, we just endured, and somehow we won. Blenheim stands as one of the decisive battles in European history. It ended French dreams of hegemony. It preserved the independence of the German states. It secured English influence on the continent. The battle demonstrated that superior logistics, bold strategy, and unity of command could overcome numerical advantage. Marlborough himself would say, "The battle was won by the courage of the common soldier. I merely showed them where to stand." But history knows better. Blenheim was won by genius, by the greatest march of the age, by diplomatic skill that held a fractious alliance together, by tactical brilliance that exploited French mistakes and created opportunities where none seemed to exist. The palace that bears the battle's name still stands in Oxfordshire. Inside, murals depict the battle's climax. Visitors walk through rooms celebrating martial glory. But few think of the marsh, the blood, the screaming horses, the boys who drowned, weighed down by equipment. Few remember that glory is built on suffering, that every triumph has its cost. August 13th, 1704, the day that changed history. The day 52,000 men proved that courage, skill, and determination could overcome empire. The day Marlborough and Eugene wrote their names in blood and fire across the fields of Bavaria. The Battle of Blenheim, where the fate of Europe was decided in a single terrible day.